G'day and welcome to the Hunting Connection podcast. My name is Zach Williams and I am your host. Here we'll connect you with hunters, fishers and outdoor enthusiasts from around the globe. This podcast will share hunting and fishing stories including past experiences and tackle the tough hunting stereotypes our community faces. We hope to be a positive influence to those outside the community while also having a laugh along the way. Hope you enjoy the podcast. G'day and welcome to another episode of Hunting Connection podcast. Today's episode we have Lakhan from Feel the Freezer all the way from New Zealand. How you going, mate?
Yeah, it's been bloody good. It's great to be on here.
It's great to have you
Seeing
on.
your stuff around for God knows how long. Been talking to you. Got you right for the site. That was pretty cool. It's looking forward to do this. First time doing this kind of like podcast stuff, so
Awesome. It's
excited to get into it.
It's good to have you on. I'd been seeing a fair bit of your stuff kicking around through Hainsey.
He's a good guy. I've talked to him a fair bit. I've been going back and forth to him about some thermal stuff recently because he does a lot of that kind of stuff, I think. And my dad and I have kind of just started getting into it. We went down to Wanganui in New Zealand, so that's like a central North Island-ish, but a little bit further south.
Awesome.
And we gave Dad as a pulsar thermal. Forgotten the model, but we had a look around with the thermal on that block and got up close to a few deer, like 20, 30 meters away, and they just weren't bothered.
That's sick.
It's just crazy how they act so different. Hainsey's a good guy. I've seen a bunch of his stuff going around for ages.
He's a top bloke. Next week we got a South Australian hunters and shooters catch up. So you're listening to this, it would have been 2 weeks ago already. But he's making about 60 kilos of venison sausages. He went and shot 3 on the weekend.
Yes, he sent me the photos of that. He shot a bunch of deer just recently.
Yeah.
It looks pretty awesome. He has a mean setup just for butchering animals and all that. I'd love to do that. At the moment, my setup is just a standing up filling table that I just pick up in the garage. And then I've got an old fridge that I'm allowed to put meat in while I'm butchering. But one day.
Yeah, I've got a camping table I fold out. I got a mincer and a vac sealer and my camping fridge. So I'll put my camping fridge on. I'll put the venison in there to chill it down, and then as I'm working, I'll put it back in and then bag it all up, freeze it.
Yeah. Oh, that's all you need, though. Honestly, like especially if you're only doing like one deer at a time. Like that's just. I tried doing 5 fellow does, and that was just way too much by myself. They were barely fitting in the fridge. It was just getting a little too hectic.
You need to get yourself a bandsaw. That definitely makes quick work of.
Oh yeah, that would be so good.
Do leg-in steaks and tomahawk.
I've never tried the leg-in steaks.
Oh, dude, that's amazing.
It would be. I'd always just wonder, like the thicker silver skin in the inside. Does that still get a bit chewy, or is it just?
I don't trim hardly any of my silver skin off venison. I just cut it into steaks.
I'm the opposite. I'm meticulous. I just like get everything off. But it's just like in our house, just like we didn't grow up on wild game a lot. It's only been in the last 3-4 years that we've kind of got into it a lot more. Now we like pretty much don't buy any meat from the supermarket. But
awesome.
It's just got to be very particular with like trimming meat and that kind of stuff. Don't want anything chewy. But like I've heard from some people, they can just do it how they want.
It all depends on what your tastes are like. Like I don't mind a chewy bit of meat, but even then I don't find much silver skin chewy either. So I found that on like some cuts, like it just doesn't matter that much. It's only on the real thick silver skin. I tend to still be pretty pedantic about it. Especially when it comes to like bigger stags and stuff, then I'll trim ridiculous amounts off. But with these fallow does, like New Zealand fallow does have to be some of like the nicest tasting meat out there. Like I've even found in the North Island of NZ, because they're eating a lot more like grassy pasture,
they just end up being so mild and just almost sweet. It's just brilliant.
So, do you know Cam Kai?
I've heard of that.
He was on New Zealand MasterChef. He did pretty well with like cooking venison on the show. So when I went over to New Zealand a couple of years back, I caught up with the guys from Huntec and went out to a private hunting cabin out there, and they invited Cam Kai down, and he cooked a bunch of.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he cooked a bunch of fallow on the barbecue down there. It was the best.
It's just sublime. It's just so, like, last night we had I just do like a bone and shoulder roast. So I just saw off just above the shank bone, and I just leave it all as a bone and roast.
Perfect.
And just slow cook that, and it just tastes delicious. And you stud it with garlic the whole way through.
Yeah, you sent through the photo as you were putting it on yesterday. And
yeah, it was bloody good. I was pretty happy with that.
I'm fasting at the moment, so you sent that through like an hour or two before my fast was finished, and I'm like, God damn it, that's making me hungry.
Oh, sorry, mate.
So we've covered you're in New Zealand. Whereabouts in New Zealand are you?
So right now, so during my summer holidays, I'm with my parents because I'm 21. Yep. But usually I'd say Mount Maunganui. So that's in Bay of Plenty. It's a pretty awesome area. It's one of the best places in the world for me, to be honest. It's just close to the beach. It's close to like Mount Maunganui is a great place to go walking. There's actually decent fishing nearby as well. You have May Island.
Yeah.
I've got to get out and do that more. I haven't done much fishing, to be honest. But
so is that
hopefully this holidays.
Is that east of Auckland?
Yeah, it's southeast of Auckland.
Yeah, okay, awesome.
Yeah, and then during the year when I'm up at university, I'm up in Auckland.
Nice.
And in Auckland, there just tends to be not very much hunting and fishing around.
When I went over, I flew into Auckland and then went down to Taupo, hunted sika down there. Then we went over to Port Waikato and hung out over there, and then we went up to Whangarei, right up the top there. So.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah. No, Northland's pretty beautiful, to be honest. I went up there for the first time in a long time to hunt feral goats with a mate. And it's just gorgeous, some of those areas. It's way hillier than you'd think. It's just good fun. I got a shot a goat with a crossbow.
That's awesome.
I was pretty happy with that. I had never shot a bow or anything like that, but he's a big bow hunter, this guy.
That's awesome.
But he had a crossbow that he just uses for all the newbies. So that was pretty awesome, taking a good sized nanny with a bow, it's crossbow.
That's sweet. That's sweet. Yeah, and coming from flat old South Australia to New Zealand, it almost killed me hiking around through Taupo and that.
Taupo's hilly, don't get me wrong, but aren't you doing TAR down in New Zealand next year?
I'm going to die,
That's going to be a whole different story, right? I'd just get good boots that'll have like a good edge to them.
Yeah.
So you can, when you're basically cutting your way through the, especially in TAR country, it's just like shale and schist. So it's almost just slipping on you. Like with my TAR hunt, when I did it last November, I made the mistake of not getting good boots, and I was just slipping and sliding. Basically coming down the hill, I was just coming down on my butt, just sliding all the way down. It was a pack full of meat, but it's so much fun though, up in those hills.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. So, do you work?
I'm a student at the moment, but I've worked during the summer holidays. At the moment, I'm just working as kind of a waiter and a bit of a bartender at a local restaurant.
Nice.
They've actually been pretty good at that place because they have a dry ager.
Oh,
so I've dropped off a leg of venison. So I'm going to split that with all the chefs and stuff. So they're like, oh, yes, this venison's pretty awesome. So I'm going to leave it there pretty much up until just before Christmas. Then just use them as Christmas steaks. That's going to be pretty cool.
Have you seen the guys that do the butter aged?
Oh, that looks awesome.
I want to try that on a backstrap.
Oh yeah, it's just like it's also just so much butter. Don't you just like throw away the butter after though?
No,
Just like
you're just cooking. Like you don't need
oh,
to
you
oil
just
up your
cook it in
pan.
the butter, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, it just melts away.
Oh,
But
that would be awesome.
yeah, so good. So what are you studying, mate?
I'm doing accounting and finance.
Nice.
Yeah, no, I'm enjoying it so far. It's still hard work, but that's why like during the semester I don't get a lot of time to get out and hunt. Like my summer is like my unofficial freezer filling season, because I just have to put as much as I can in there, and hope it lasts for during the semester. Especially because like our whole family eats a lot of venison nowadays.
That's good.
Like me, my parents, my grandmother, and my sister and her boyfriend eat a lot of venison.
That's great.
Plus, with like meat costing so much nowadays, as a student, it is an incredible asset having venison in the freezer.
100%, man, 100%. So,
So,
how did you get into hunting?
so when I was young, my grandparents owned a kiwi fruit orchard. So there was a lot of rabbits and pukekos running around there. And I was always like interested in animals and nature. Like when I was young, like a lot of kids would be watching like Nickelodeon and stuff, but for some reason I liked watching David Attenborough.
Yeah.
Just I loved the outdoors and that kind of stuff. Then when I was about 10 or so, I started like shooting rabbits, just with like an air rifle or my dad's old 22. And then at 16, I went out on my first deer hunt. Was lucky enough to go down south with a guy that I still know really well to this day. It's an incredible guy, Chris McCarthy from Lake Hawea Hunting Safaris.
Okay,
Just an awesome. He's a wealth of knowledge. Like
I know that name. I reckon
crazy.
I see that on Instagram quite a bit and possibly Facebook.
Yeah, he's an awesome guy. So, I'll tell you about him later. But I went down, shot a fellow and a few goats. But to be honest, like I didn't really catch the bug, as per se, especially because it was like didn't take a huge amount of meat off the animals on those hunts. It just didn't really like feel that. It didn't really make that much sense. Like, oh, you're just shooting an animal. Yeah, what's the point? It was still a lot of fun. It was an awesome experience, but I didn't really like get the bug. Wasn't until I was about like 18, and I saw Meat Eater for the first time. I don't know why, but I remember like specifically, I was watching a episode on Sitka Blacktail. It was the ones of Prince of Wales Island.
Yeah.
I just thought that was so cool.
Was that the one where he's out by himself, or was he with Rogan and Callan?
No, it was one of like their camera guys that they took out for the first hunt. Because at that point Netflix didn't have all like the season 1, 2, and 3 on.
That's
but that I don't know. Just after that, things started getting. I started really getting into hunting. And I didn't do much hunting like after that till probably like the end of 2020.
Yeah, wow.
And then I got my first red hind, and then I went into this particular part of the station again with Chris, and it was just one of those beautiful places in New Zealand. Like I still remember that. I was like, this is something awesome that I want to be doing for a long time.
That's awesome.
It was basically just like up this big valley, and you had beech forest along parts of the valley, and then tussock tops, and it was just the most gorgeous morning. And it was on a big private station, and you just had this little, like, you knew that those New Zealand high country huts, they're just like tin on all sides. It's not like fancy, but it's just the perfect way to enjoy that kind of landscape. But then after that, I just started trying to hunt as much as possible.
That's awesome, man. So it was a slow, long burn until you caught the bug.
Yeah, no. That's the thing. Like a lot of people kind of expect it. Like the first time you go out, that's kind of you catch the bug straight away. But I don't know why. But for some reason, it just didn't come until later. Probably a little bit of like mental maturity.
Yeah.
Pretty annoying back then. Not gonna lie. Yeah, no. just maturing a little bit, like realizing what it's all about. Also, the food connection things. Like in our family, food has always been a pretty big thing. Always try and eat pretty clean and healthy. My grandmother always had a garden, so kind of exposed to that side of things. So hunting just made sense because it was just another way to source your own food.
Yeah, man, 100%.
That's not to say like it hasn't taken some convincing on like the part, like me convincing the rest of my family to eat venison and that kind of stuff. I remember the first time we came back from that hunt where I had a red hind and Dad shot a fellow doe, and we came back and we just thought whether we just butchered the animal in the kitchen, because we flew back from Queenstown. We basically had these big coolers. And you know how when you're flying with venison or you're flying with meat, it's just all the water starts to go in the bottom. Like the water kind of drips out of the meat. So we came in and home, and Mum was just like mortified by us having this venison in there. I remember that. So since then, that's why we've had to have the butchering station down in the garage, and there's been less conflict since then. But yeah, no. But overall, my family's been pretty amazing when it comes to this hunting stuff.
That's right.
Yeah, I've been pretty lucky.
Yeah, it was a slow burn for me. I couldn't tell you the age I started going out with my pop. We used to do a lot of camping, fishing, and shooting and hunting. A lot of goats and that back then. But then I got into deer hunting around 18, and then as soon as I got my first deer with a bow, it was on like Donkey Kong. That's all I thought about. That's all I still think about.
Bow hunting does seem pretty damn awesome. I'm not gonna like, if I had more time to like go out. Like I love the thing with rifle hunting. You can just go out and it's like almost guaranteed you get an animal on the ground. Especially if you're going into areas with lots and lots of animals. And when you have limited time to hunt, like I always choose a rifle, but I'd love, when I have more time to hunt in the future, I'd love to try a bow with a bow. Just on goats and that kind of stuff would be so cool.
Definitely do it. Definitely do it.
Yeah.
I don't bow hunt as much as I like these days, but if I feel like I want to just go out and be successful, I'll take the rifle for a walk. If I just want to go out for a walk and enjoy the walk and the nature, I'll either take the compound or the recurve out with me.
Oh, the recurve is just a different level. Again, that mate up in Northland that I have, he hunts with a compound, but also with a recurve, and he's shot like feral cattle with them. It's just, he shoots a lot of good sized pigs with them. That's because up north, pretty much north of the Woodhill herd of fallow deer, you don't really have deer in New Zealand. Up north, it's just goats, pigs, and the odd escapee feral cattle. They're not really feral cattle. It's like they've just been wild for about 8 or 9 years. In some bush blocks. They absolutely rip up the bush. Because New Zealand bush is pretty damn fragile, and those cattle are pretty massive. But it's a pretty cool area up north, to be honest. And you get a lot of peacocks up there as well.
Yeah, that's something I was hoping to run into while I was up there. And another strange one, I know it's a bit lower, but another strange one you guys can bow hunt is wallabies. Like over here.
We have 2 species of wallabies. So in Rotorua, around Rotorua Lakes, there's 1 species of wallabies. It's like a smaller species that you guys have in Western Australia.
Yeah.
This is really small, but one of my mates, Philip Lewis Maximilian, wild heart hunter, he does a bit of wallaby hunting. Those are the ones he goes after. And then I've done once. So after my tahr hunt, we did a night of wallaby shooting down south. And those are the Bennett's wallabies, the rednecks. Yeah. And they're just plagues by the freaking thousands down there. I had stories on big stations of shooting 10,000 wallabies in a year. It's just bonkers.
That's insane.
Yeah. They're cool animals to hunt. They're not very smart like the ones we were onto. But they're just an awesome animal to be around.
I bet.
Yeah.
So what type of gear are you hunting with?
Well, of recent, I've started like investing in a bit of Kuyu gear. I bought a Kuyu pack, one of the big ones with a full load shelf and everything. It was bought mainly for hunting down south, but I started messing around with a bit of Kuyu stuff. So I have one of the big packs with that has like a back load shelf, so you can stuff a whole bunch of meat in the back of that. And to be honest, like that thing has been really good even just on my day hunts, because you can just strap it all tightly together and you can still put whatever you need really in it.
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, they're great things, and they're just so nice on your back with the steel frame and everything. That was a pretty awesome piece of gear. And then I have a Kuyu Bino harness, and I have some as a 21st present, I got these Swarovski binos.
Very flash.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome.
That's a pretty sweet birthday gift.
It came with a warning. It's like, if you damage these, well, you're in deep crap. But and fair enough, because they're just super clear. Because it was always between my dad and I. He would have a pair of binos, and it would always be tied to his harness. So I'd be like asking him, like, where's the animal? I can't even see it. Can I use your binos? And I have to lean over close to his chest to pull the things up. So that kind of resolved that. But that was, pretty awesome. But to be honest, otherwise in terms of gear, I keep it pretty basic. I think a lot of hunters go over the board sometimes.
Yep.
Like having to buy like specific hunting gear. Not everything has to be camo. You can just, a lot of the time, if you have like a good pair of pants, a good jacket, a cap or something, or beanies and gloves, then everything else just kind of doesn't matter. And boots, of course. Like
yeah,
good.
100%.
Yeah. Like I think a lot of people go overboard and buy lots of fancy gear. To be honest, a lot of Kuyu guys do that. From what I've seen. I'm tempted to go that way because it does look pretty awesome. But
what camo are you running over there? Are you running one of those trusty New Zealand brands, or?
Yeah. So, it's not Bushbuck. It's another one, but I bought them on like a clearance sale. So both Dad and I have the same ones, but just different camo patterns.
Yeah, perfect.
And my pack, Dad got the camo version of that, which is just good for like forests, and then I got the one that's just a plain slate gray.
Yeah.
Just good, better for alpine stuff. Because to be honest, like we haven't done a lot of bush hunting in New Zealand. Like in New Zealand, hunting can kind of just really be broken down into three types. You have farm hunting, so you're just, a lot of the time you're on like a quad bike or something and you're just shooting deer along bush edges.
Yeah. And
you don't really need camo for that, to be honest. Then you have bush hunting, which is a lot harder, and it's not something I haven't had a lot of success with yet. But then New Zealand bush can be incredibly dense, depending on where you are. Like where you went after Seeker, it's more like beech forest, which is just gorgeous. But
everything's mossy.
That's usually a little bit more open.
Everything's mossy. All the trees under that moss is dead.
Oh yeah, no. That's the hard part. It does make it hard to walk anywhere. But then down south you have all the alpine stuff. And to be honest, I like the big open range spot and stalk hunting more than anything. It's pretty. So yeah,
that's awesome.
That's what I do.
What rifle are you running?
Oh, we have a few going at the moment. So this is the thing. I don't have my gun license.
Okay.
So technically I have no guns. So they're all my dad's.
Yep.
And I have to ask permission to take them out and use them. But we have a Howard 243. We have a 7mm08, which is what we use for reds and tar. I shot my tar with a 7mm08. We also have a 7mm mag, but we haven't really gotten that out yet. When my dad did a stag hunt a couple of years ago, he was going to use that, but then it just wasn't shooting right. We had a bit of a problem with the scope on it, just because it's such a long barrel, as long action gun. We needed just a massive scope on it. It's an absolute behemoth of a gun.
Yeah, the 7mm 08s. Sorry, 7mm Rem mags are nice.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. Like, if I ever do proper red stag shooting, I'd probably use that. But the 7mm we use on reds and tar, and we use it on fallow every now and again. But we have 243, 223, and 22-250.
Very nice.
And then a bunch of just rimfire rifles.
So what's your...
We do a lot with 1.7s,
Yep.
1.7 HMRs, turkeys. I'm yet to get a peacock with it. Peacocks have been my one massive elusive species. Last February, we were on a place that had a lot of them, but for some reason, I just could not shoot one. It was like Wile E. Coyote and the Roadrunner.
That's great.
And because peacocks, they're a strange bird in that they can, when they're on top of a hill, they'll fly off it like a pheasant. But then when they're at the bottom of a hill, they'll just run like an emu or something weird.
Roadrunner.
Like a roadrunner. But they're a cool little bird. One that I want to get. It's supposed to taste amazing as well.
That was my next question. Have you eaten one?
No. So Philip, my mate, he shoots a few every now and again, and he's made some pretty awesome. He's made like a coq au vin with it. They have like a yellowish fat to them.
Yeah.
Which apparently they're like a pretty amazing eating bird.
Yeah, awesome.
Shot a fair few turkeys. We have feral turkeys here.
Yeah, I know. They're so good. They're one of my favorite.
They're good
things.
fun shooting. They're very, very dumb. So for 1.7, you can kind of just sit back on a hill and
ditch the 1.7. Go get that bow. Go shoot them with a bow.
Oh, that would actually be a very good way to practice your bow shooting. Do you guys have much of them over in South Australia?
No, we've got a very, very small population here. And it's very well kept. And then there's a couple of small...
They'd get hammered by like cats and foxes, wouldn't they?
Cats, where they are, there's no foxes, so just cats.
Oh, okay. And then I guess you have all your snakes and eagles and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. In New Zealand, it's just different like that. There's nothing that can kill it. There's the odd cat, and you'll get the odd farm dog that'll go after them. Like when we were young, we had a Labrador that was very, very good at catching turkeys and neighbors' chickens and stuff. But apart from that, like not much is hurting these turkeys. So they can just explode in numbers so quick.
Do the like stoats and the ferrets and the weasels get into the poults?
Not that I really know of. Like they probably eat chicks. Like I know, the chicks have a pretty damn high survival rate. Like from what I know, back in the States, their survival rate is like 10 or 20% of the chicks get past the first few months. In New Zealand, it'll probably be like 80 or 90% get past the first few months.
Yeah, that's insane. The mate I'm going down with in the South Island hunting with, he was telling a story how he did a population control cull, and they got something like 400 turkeys in a day.
Oh, I'm not surprised. They're good eating. Like a lot of people turn their nose up at them.
I love them, man.
Which is crazy because in the States they're like revered as a game animal, but here there's a saying like you don't eat a turkey in a month with an R in it. So it's only during the winter that you're supposed to eat them. Okay. But I've eaten them in like February, and they've been pretty damn good. So
turkeys are pretty amazing. You got schnitzels out of the breast. You got thighs and drumsticks. Chuck in the slow cooker, make amazing curries, and then the rest of it just chuck in a pot and make stock.
Yeah, no, it's a great little animal, especially if you get a young one. When I'm shooting with the 1.7, you basically aim for the V in their neck. So it's it's a big enough spot that you can just kill them, but you're not damaging any of your breast meat.
Very nice.
And the crop, so that can be a bit annoying, but yeah, that's I find that's just the perfect place to be hitting them.
Very nice. So what's your main go-to deer rifle when you're going out? Is that the 243 or?
Fellow, I like the 243 that we have is just a great gun.
Yeah.
It's just deadly accurate. It's something that we can just rely on. It's got a CDS system on it, so we can just dial down the range
Nice.
to whatever.
Yep.
And that is an awesome gun. My dad shot a smaller bull tar with it even. So when I was shooting my tar, he had this kind of cripple bull. So he had just a bung legs from a bad fall. But it was like from ages ago. He's the same age as my bull, but he was so stunted in his growth, he looked like a yearling.
Yeah, wow.
But he shot that one straight after he shot mine with the 243. And that was at like 280 meters or something. It was
Very nice.
long distance. He's a good shot though, my dad. So
that's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
Yeah.
So, what's your top beginner tip getting into hunting? So you started fairly late. So what do you reckon is a good tip for someone trying to get into it?
Use the internet. We're blessed with a huge resource of hunting tips, just watching shows, all of that kind of stuff on the internet. YouTube is an incredible resource. I have 3 of my close mates. I'm trying to get out for their first hunt. And I'm just encouraging them to just watch media episodes and watch how to butcher an animal from nose to tail, all that kind of stuff. You can learn so much nowadays just without even going out in the field. There's nothing you can't beat going out in the field, of course, but the next best thing is using the internet. What I'd say is even before you go and ask another hunter to take you out and that kind of stuff, just do your research on these are the animals in my area. These are the ones that I really want to hunt. This is how you use that meat. This is how you hunt that animal. Just learning all of that first, and then going to a hunter that you may ask to take you out.
Yeah, 100%. That's great advice. Definitely learn everything you can before you ask, and you'll impress the person you're asking, and they're probably more inclined to take you out.
Oh God, yeah. No, if someone asked me, who's just never thought about hunting before 2 days ago, I was like, oh, can you take me out deer shooting? I'd probably say no, because one, that interest probably isn't going to be sustained. Yeah. So part of it is also especially with how long it takes to get your licenses in New Zealand. I've had to wait since July of last year.
Yeah, wow.
To get mine, and I only recently had my interview, so I still have to wait another 7 to 8 weeks to get my actual license.
What's the process of getting your license there? It sounds like I know you guys have more access to firearms than we do, but the license sounds like it's a pain in the ass. It almost sounds worse than Australia.
Yeah, no, that's probably a good way of saying it, to be honest. So basically you have to fill out this big application form. It's 40 pages and something, and you have to do all of your residents, who's living with you, all their details.
Wow.
You have to provide a doctor's reference, so that they can check with them that you're mentally sane. Then you have to provide 2 references, one that can be within your family, and then one that's just a person you know.
Yeah, wow.
And they recommend you must have known those people for a year or so at least.
So after all of that process, do you have to go do a a theory test?
Yeah,
and
practical? So you have to go do a practical for a day. So you actually first sit the arms code test. So I did that, and you have to get 28 out of 30 to pass. I think it's 28 or 27, I can't remember, but 20, you have to do well to pass. And then they take you through a practical through just some guns and whatnot. And then let's say if you didn't pass it the first time, they let you do sit it again, a second version of the test after that practical. And then if you fail that, that's a serious problem.
Yeah, wow.
But
that's...
I don't know what happens to those people, but
they just get rid of them.
I think you just have to do the whole thing again. But then anyway, then you go through the vetting process. So it goes off to a different office, and they do all your background checks. Then they have to interview you and your references in person, which is what I've had to do recently. And then they have to come and check your gun safe, that it's bolted into it has to be bolted into 3 surfaces. So it's not going anywhere. And then they'll check that it's in a safe place. And then they'll ask you a bunch of questions about how do you deal with, I had ones asked me how do you deal with stress? And just questions like that, big open-ended questions that, to be honest, do seem like a bit of a waste of time, especially because they're on the application form. But yeah.
That's insane.
And then that goes to the capital, so it goes to Wellington after that, and then I have to wait for my license to come.
Jesus. Yeah, no, that's insane. That because everyone looks at New Zealand as a better place to be a firearms owner. Once you get your license, it seems that way.
It's kind of getting worse and worse.
So is all of that licensing way of doing things, has that come after Christchurch, or was that all in place?
A lot of it is, and a lot of the reason. So, even though that sounds like a lot, it shouldn't really be taking that long. It shouldn't be taking 2 years.
Yeah.
It's just because we've had a combination of COVID, so a lot of workers just weren't able to process licenses, and then you had the legislation behind the licensing process became so much more complicated, but you didn't have, government didn't invest more money into the process.
Yeah.
So you basically have the same amount of people doing way more work.
Yeah.
So it's very hard to feel you're on, I'd always call up to ask is there anything I can do to speed up the process, blah, blah, blah. And you'd hear them and they'd be pretty damn stressed, to be honest, because they're trying to process thousands of applications.
That's insane.
It's a bit of a mess, the system at the moment, but hopefully it gets better. The Deer Stalkers and NZ is doing a little bit of work behind that. And hopefully it will start to come to fruition soon.
Yeah, that's insane. So here in South Australia, you put in your application, your police clearance type thing.
Yeah.
It's probably, when I did it was maybe 2 months. You got your stuff back. Then you go do a day course. That's a theory and a practical.
Yeah.
And then you get your license a couple months after that.
That sounds like heaven. I was talking to my dad about that today. It would just be so nice. I want to go out on my first solo hunt. I really just want to peel off. We did a trip with me, my dad, and a few of his workmates. It's like a work hunting trip. But during that time, I wanted to peel off on my own a lot. And it's been through these last 2 years, I feel I've gotten a lot of hunting experience. I've been blessed to have that, but I haven't been blessed to be able to go and just do it by myself because of that licensing thing.
That's insane.
So as soon as it comes, I'm going off.
That's awesome. So what would be the top 5 items for a beginner you would recommend?
Invest in good boots. That's one. A good glass is another one that's really good. A decent pack, especially if you're doing backcountry stuff. Invest in a good pack, because that's investing in your back as well. Investing in your legs and knees. And actually, when you get an animal, you'll be able to carry it out. In New Zealand, a lot of hunters do the old deer backpack trip. But doing that so often, especially with big red hinds and stuff, it can screw your back up. I bet.
I can only imagine.
You see a lot of the pig hunters in New Zealand do it. And it looks awesome, don't get me wrong. The photos are amazing. But that thing has got to screw your back up. I try to, as much as I can, break the animal down on the spot.
Yeah.
But anyway, next one would be a good knife. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just a good knife that is sturdy enough so you can do skinning in the field, but also has a fine enough tip on it that you can do boning and stuff really well.
Yeah.
I find I was kind of lucky. So I put one of my tar photos into a hunting magazine, and I won something, and I won one of these knives that I still use.
That's awesome.
At the moment, it's a bloody good knife, especially because I got it for free. But I did like red stags, did fallow. I've done so many animals on that knife now. On this trip, so we got 12 deer between 7 people. So me and my dad kind of know more of the butchery side than everything. So between my dad and I, we did about 8 deer with that knife.
That's great.
So yeah, ended up being that's like investing in a good knife is really important. And then I say, and just investing in like putting time into like doing your research. Like so many hunters, they'll go out into the field and they'll learn about like how to shoot a deer, but when it comes to the animal on the ground, they don't know what to do. Like in New Zealand, I think that's one thing that we could really do a lot better is using the animal better, especially for stuff outside of deer. Like I know so many hunters that will shoot a goat and say, well, why the hell would I want to eat that? But I personally love young, like nanny goats, just so bloody good.
Oh, goat's amazing.
So good. Even like I shot this one billy, and he was definitely stinky, don't get me wrong. But in a good curry and put into sausages, he actually ended up being pretty damn good.
Yeah, you put enough spice in it, I think, and it's pretty good.
Yeah, exactly.
So that goes on to one of the dot points you wanted to touch on, assigning a value to game animals.
Yeah. Okay. So this is one of the things I've kind of been working on over the last little while. It's kind of been a little project of mine because I've been lucky enough to go into a lot of big stations down south where I've done a bit of work, just like helping out in camp. But just with you have huge numbers of animals across just a huge area. But aside from the trophy value of an animal, which can be like exponentially large, it's really hard in New Zealand to actually put like a value on an animal. Like this is how much we value this animal. So what I was trying to do is just like assign, like I called it food value, FV. So it's basically the amount of money that you would have to spend to buy the equivalent amount of meat at the supermarket, just at the bare minimum price, like the cheapest beef or the cheapest chicken. And like we started looking at it like how much of that food value gets realized when it's a hunter going out and harvesting it. Let's say they butcher up that animal and they get everything off it and they take that home. For a red hind, it's something like $800 worth of meat.
Yeah, wow.
It can be incredibly large, but then I was very interested in it, like how much value are we losing if we're culling that animal? Like you're not getting any of that meat, so all of that meat that drops off. But then you're also spending money, like a considerable amount of money, a lot of the time, getting up in the helicopter and for fuel and labor and everything. So that's like a negative economic cost. And then what about if we commercially harvested it? So for venison recovery is a big thing in New Zealand, has been for the last 50, 60 years. A lot of our wild venison ends up going to Europe. So a lot of the time, farmers and whatnot, let's say you have a herd of 1,000 deer on your property and you'll cull off 200 hinds a year. So they'll sell those hinds only for $300-400 a pop. So you're only going to see half of that economic value within that country. So it's just one thing that I just found quite interesting, like how we measure the value of our game animals. And like if you added up like all the animals in New Zealand that just get culled and aerial from choppers, like that's the potential economic loss that is creating.
And we have the same issue down here, up here compared to you guys, but so we have a bunch of aerial culling in South Australia. South Australia, we have no public land to hunt. It's all private property.
That's tough, man.
It's horrible. And then we pay for choppers to go shoot all of
the deer that you would like to shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's all of that. Then Victoria, there's lots of public land. You pay about an $80 fee a year to hunt the public land over there.
That's good. At least someone's like you're paying a little bit, putting it forward towards conservation.
It is.
I wish we had that in New Zealand, to be honest.
But then they go cull all the deer in those areas and the national parks still via chopper. In those areas, there's a lot of wild dogs, so that raises wild dog numbers by all the meat
lucky
around.
We don't have wild dogs.
And then New South Wales, they do a fair bit of aerial culling as well, which is like you've said, it's a waste of a resource. It's the money it could make.
It boils my blood, mate.
Like I've heard figures of $100,000, $200,000 every time a helicopter goes up down here in South Australia.
Oh God, yeah.
That's
like even on this particular station where I've done a bit of work, they don't have to hire a chopper because they use a chopper for mustering sheep and stuff off the hills. But they're still paying for petrol and paying for time and labor. It takes a lot of economic resources to do. It's not like you just snap your fingers and there's a helicopter in the air.
Exactly.
It's a massive issue. And then also with the food value side of things, that's just one way of valuing an animal. If you put like the value of the experience and all of those intangibles, the reason why I chose food values is because it's the one tangible value that you can really assign to an animal. Everything else, like to put a value on like just seeing the animal, that's priceless, if anything. But what I really wanted to do, hopefully, is develop it into a system where, as a landowner, you'd be able to say, "Oh, this many deer on my property has this value."
That's awesome.
That's something I'd like to develop more into the future.
Going from that, what about breaking the cycle of culling the game animals?
Yeah, so that's kind of carrying on from there. I think we've talked about it a little bit already, but it's just like in New Zealand, it's kind of hindered a lot of our conservation efforts for just like literally hundreds of years. Ever since red deer, for instance, have been in New Zealand pretty much since we came here.
Yeah.
Like I did an article of one of the first liberations of red deer, and it was in like 1890 something, which is crazy to think that these deer have been around for that long. But ever since then, like within 20 years, they were getting overpopulated already. And what we've been in the constant cycle of is just numbers going up way too high, hunters not being able to get like good quality trophy animals because there's no good feed around, and then government coming in or private landowners coming in and just culling the population, dropping it all the way down, hunters not having an opportunity then to shoot animals, and then just having like a little sweet spot period kind of in between those big waves of big fluctuations of populations. So when I say breaking the cycle of culling is actually learning from our mistakes over the past 100 years and saying, okay, just culling the population isn't going to work. We're never really going to eradicate deer. We'd have to put a lot of economic resources to completely get rid of deer, because even if you leave one or two in a valley, they can just proliferate from there on out if you don't keep that consistent management. So when I mean breaking the cycle of culling is actually creating systems within on private and public land where we promote a consistent and constant science-based harvest.
Yep.
So we're like I discussed this with a mate of mine, but it was using game management units. You break basically you break all of Australia and New Zealand into big 10,000 acre blocks, and in each block you'd say this is the number of deer, this is how many need to be harvested, this is the ideal amount of deer, so where you're not impacting the environment, but hunters can still shoot animals, and then go from there. It's great in theory, of course. It takes funding and it takes money.
100%.
But I think as hunters, if we want to get out of this constant cycle of having our animals culled every 10, 20 years, on the pieces of private land that we do have control over, creating those kind of systems where we use proper science-based management to control our numbers over the long term, I think that will be the future. Those are the places where deer will be thriving for the longest time. That's the places where hunters will have the best opportunities.
So on that, touching back onto you saying New Zealand and Australia as well has a delicate ecosystem. So how do you find that because look, as a hunter, I'm torn between I know they're mainly a game animal in New Zealand. Over here, they're mainly classed as a feral species.
But to be honest, they're classed as a feral pest here. So we have technically they're game animals, but everyone that's not a hunter calls them a pest.
Yeah. So as a hunter, I'm torn between, and I'm an animal lover. I love conservation. Yeah. I grew up just binge watching Steve Irwin. So,
oh god, he's my hero.
That little photo
I cried when I found out he died when I was 3 years old.
So did I, man. I got a little photo of him up there and up behind me.
Oh, that's so good, man.
But I'm torn between keeping deer on the ecosystem and then getting rid of them on the ecosystem, because any introduced species wreaks havoc on the ecosystem no matter how many we have. And then I want them there for selfish reasons, because I love hunting deer, I love eating deer, and I just love the animals on the landscape. It's a very hard subject.
I definitely get what you mean. I've thought about that a lot. But at the same time, you kind of have to step back and look at it as a long-term thing. That ecosystems change. Humans have introduced a massive sweeping amount of change that basically ecosystems have never seen before. But that doesn't mean that every change that humans make to an ecosystem is wrong or immoral and something that we need to reverse. With deer in New Zealand and Australia or any other game animals, I think the best thing that we can do is try and assimilate them into our modern ecosystems. The big thing I hear from everyone who calls deer a pest is that they have no natural predators. Well, there's millions of their natural predators. They're called humans. It's just that we need to stop kind of just enable as much of our population as possible to harvest these animals, to interact with them, and to actually act as functioning predators of them. I think if we did that, we'd look at deer a lot differently.
So do you think as hunters we pick and choose too much and focus more on the antler side of stuff than taking hinds and does and yearlings?
I think somewhat. Don't get me wrong, hunting stags and bucks is so much fun. It's just an incredible experience. But then you've got to the realities of conservation in New Zealand is that we have to step up as hunters and shoot a lot of does and hinds. I try for most of my freezer to be full of does and hinds, and reduce the number of spikers that I shoot. And that's just kind of the trophy influence kind of comes from the Northern Hemisphere. So a lot of the hunting media, the first hunting media that came into Australia and New Zealand came from Europe and North America, and their ideals of conservation are completely different from ours.
100%.
We're in an incredible situation. When you think about it, we have a huge diversity of game animals, huge numbers of game animals over a huge area of land with very little people. That's pretty much the opposite of Europe and North America. They still have a huge abundance of animals, but they're dealing with huge populations. They're dealing with animals with natural predators, and they're dealing with animals that are often facing threats to their existence. In New Zealand, it's the complete opposite, and the same in Australia. In most cases, to be honest. And if we want like a good functioning conservation system, we have to make it adapted to those factors, which is difficult because most other countries can just look to their neighbors and they have like a similar format. But in New Zealand and Australia, we kind of haven't done that for so long because there hasn't been anyone to look to.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a complicated topic. I could talk a lot.
It is. It is.
It hurts the brain.
It's a very complicated topic. One of my good mates and former guests, and part owner of Eureka Tactical, Dan. He just finished his degree in biology.
Yes.
So he's very much, we need to get rid of all feral introduced species.
No, I get that.
Because
but it's different, like studying. He's probably also seen these animals in real life, but a lot of the people who write those textbooks haven't.
Yeah.
And it's hard to explain to those people the intangibles of like, if humans help manage them, the impact can be much less. And like less so in New Zealand because we never really had megafauna. But in Australia, you guys had previously you had giant kangaroos and shit like that. And in part, not fully, of course, because they're not the exact same, but in part, some of your introduced species do fill those vacant niches.
Kind of, but all of our native animals and the megafauna, they all had soft pads for feet.
Yeah, that is true.
All the introduced
That's why
stuff,
everyone talks about camels.
Hardos.
They're the one with soft pads.
They are.
But there's of course differences. I'm not saying that a giant wombat is the same as a deer. But ecosystems changed. It's not a stagnant thing. And we have, of course, it's unusual looking at the fossil record and saying, our period of time that we live in is the one of greatest change, of course. And introduced species, I think, is part of that. But if you look at it over the long term, if we can help slowly get our ecosystems used to these introduced species, it could actually be great because it's like a additional influx of biodiversity from all around the world. So, and especially in Australia and New Zealand, if you look at the rest of the globe, they've had a lot of their large megafauna animals in the past 50 to 100 years have just been crashing. New Zealand and Australia has been the opposite.
Yeah,
of course, it's not all shiny and roses and everything, but it's something also kind of to be proud of and amazed by. And it's hard to explain to that people.
I definitely agree with you on most of it. I just know that Dan's listening to this when he's listening to it, and he's cringing, he's screaming at us. So, creating a new model of conservation for Oz and New Zealand, apart from what you've covered, what else do you have in mind? How could we go about?
Just a funding model. It's something that a lot of people might not like in Australia and New Zealand, but having to pay for a deer license or something like that, or having to pay $10-20 for a tag or something, especially in our remote public land blocks in New Zealand. I think that could be something great. Having a system where you pay for the deer that you shoot, and then that money goes back towards conservation. So monitoring those populations, make sure they're not getting too high, and then actually alerting the public if they are getting too high and say, in this specific area, we want you to be shooting more hinds.
Okay.
Using a model of conservation that uses just a better funding. And also, if in an ideal world, what I'd like to see, I think a few people in Australia and New Zealand have already touched on this, but similar tax to the Pittman-Robertson Act, where an excise tax on hunting gear and rifles and that kind of stuff, and it went towards conservation. And in New Zealand, it would do really well to go towards the licensing process. to make it swifter and actually give them enough staff, I think that's something that would be really worthwhile. It would just be investing in your hunters for the future.
Yeah, it's definitely something that's crossed my mind. The whole Pittman Robinson and Dingle Johnson for the fishing side of stuff. The thing is, we're taxed so much on everything as it is.
Oh yeah,
over here.
So again, easier said than done.
You'd have
with
to
any
take
of this kind of stuff.
You'd have to like take the GST off of everything and whatever that GST is on stuff, and then put it into the Pittman Robinson, Dingle Johnson type thing over here. And I would fully support that if it was done like that, and the money went back into conservation.
Yeah, if you actually knew the money was going into conservation, not just culling more deer.
Yeah, yeah.
100%. That is the real danger, because if you have a government body that's not invested in protecting your game animals, then the very act that could do lots of good could completely destroy things.
Exactly.
So that is the catch to that. But it's a very hard topic to address, really. There's so much you could go into.
We almost need like a Australia-New Zealand Game Council.
Oh, like we have New Zealand Game Council.
Yeah, but
we have
like
that.
Like
I know it's a collective one. I know, like
one that can take on.
What I really want to get as a book is the North American Model of Wildlife Conservation, the full Dr. Valerius Guy's textbook. Sounds a bit nerdy wanting a textbook, but
no. Just listening.
That's one thing I'd love to get and to read that.
You need it on audiobook, because Valerius Geist, just the way he speaks is amazing.
Oh, his voice is just it's
memorizing.
Bless, he's passed away now, but I remember listening to a episode with him on the Ben O'Brien hunting podcast. It was back when it was Hunting Collective. Man, that was cool. That was one of my favorite episodes of that.
100%.
He's just such a cool guy. Him and Shane Mahoney, they have two of the best voices on planet Earth.
I definitely agree with that, man. Those guys together, especially with Ben's personality, it just works so well.
Oh yeah, no. Those were one of my like top 2 or 3 like favorite podcasts. I listen to Woodside, the new one that he does now. Yeah. I listen to that every now and again. It's not as good as Hunting Collective. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know why. I just like the nostalgia of it.
I miss Phil. So the episode that he had recently on with Phil, that was good. Just a trip down memory lane.
The engineer.
Yeah. Phil Taylor.
I remember those episodes where they do like the turkey hand drawings, and it was quite funny.
The Hunting Collective definitely inspired this podcast, and the name actually came. So the Hunting Connection actually came through.
I thought so. I thought it had a little bit of a connection there.
it did. It actually came in one of the group chats with Ben and a bunch of the other guys in it from the Hunting Common. We're all coming up with names for the Hunting Common, and they're spitballing all these different names, and I just seen the Hunting Connection, and when they chose the Hunting Common, I'm just like, hey, can I steal that name?
Fair enough, man. It's a good one. You gotta take those. We need like a good name for something. Like I remember when I was deciding on Phil the Freezer, I didn't know what the hell to call that account. I had it like blank for so long. I just had like a bunch of dashes and commas as my thing for ages, because I didn't know what I was going to call it. But once you get that, like, it just clicks.
It does.
And you can't change it from there. But yeah, no.
That's awesome. Zombie apocalypse weapon. Something a little less serious.
Yes. Okay. So this is inspired by a movie I remember watching. So it's one of the more recent John Wicks. But it's a Benelli M4 with buckshot in it.
Very nice.
I just remember, I could just imagine with zombies, they would just be so good. Just point blank through 2 or 3 heads at once. Just absolutely shatter them.
Just mess it.
But I don't think like an AR would really work that well. I want to stay alive, like apocalypse. But I just need a lot of ammo.
Yes, and
That's the thing with these shotguns.
It's heavy.
Yeah, they'd be bloody heavy as well. Like, anyway, yeah, no, that's definitely what I'd do as my Benelli M4. Maybe put like a bayonet on the front of it, so I could stab a little bit. But yeah, just anything to stay alive, really.
That's awesome. What have you forgotten on a hunting trip?
Oh God, I've nearly forgotten a lot of stuff. Like I'm pretty forgetful person, to be honest. So I think once or twice I've gotten the wrong bolt for a rifle. We have like a gun safe at our place, and it's got all the bolts in a little box up the top, and so many of the bolts just look similar to each other. And especially like my dad has a lot of rim fires. So like a lot of his older 22s from his childhood, and then we have our new 22s and 1.7. But a lot of the bolts just look virtually identical. So we always I get those mixed up. I think once I forgot like proper socks on a hunt. So I was in boots, but I had like low top socks.
Ankle socks.
Yeah, and that was not. I'm trying to make a fashion statement, but it didn't work.
Just ended up with blisters on your ankles instead.
But to be honest, like I've been averted from a lot of like leaving hunting gear behind by my dad or by like people I've been hunting with. So I've gotten lucky. But to be honest, I haven't been hunting that long, so it's bound to happen.
Oh, 100%.
Bound to forget the rifle or something like that. I don't know.
just touching on the bolts there. Is that a storage requirement to keep the bolts?
So in New Zealand now, you have to store your firearms in one box, and then your bolts and your ammo in another. And it has to be separate from each other, so they can't be attached, and they have to have two different sets of keys. So when I get in my process of getting my license, I had to buy a gun safe and then a separate safe on top, like a jewelry box safe.
That's ridiculous.
Oh, don't get me started. It is ridiculous, but, I'm gonna do anything to get my license at this point.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I do not blame you. What about the most sketchy / dangerous thing that's happened while you've been out?
I'd probably be on my tar hunt. Like, to be honest, like looking at the experiences of a lot of other people, I'll probably tell the story of this guide actually a little bit later on. But anyway, I was on this tar hunt, and I'd never really been up in like the true mountains of New Zealand, like Alps. So basically, you're going up from the river bottoms, which are these big, like probably like 300-400 meter wide river bottoms. There's just boulders and rocks, and then you're just going straight up, pretty much. To where the tar are. So in spring, you're trying to like meet the tar halfway up the mountain. So because in the evenings they drop down the mountain, so your best chance of getting them is at like basically past 5 o'clock. So at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, you start climbing. So it was just like super steep, and like I said, I didn't have really good boots. So I was always just slipping and sliding. And in New Zealand, we have this bush called Matagari. And it's just like a super thorny bush, and it'll just get stuck in your hands, get stuck everywhere. And I remember, like, I'm not amazing for around heights, which probably isn't the best thing to have, is like someone going mountain hunting. But I remember like that. I thought that was pretty damn sketchy. And then doing some of the big river crossings that they have, like those high alpine streams that are just so cold.
I bet.
But you can just basically put your head into it and drink. It's just so clean.
That's insane.
It's just melt water. Like when you go in your time, you'll hopefully see that kind of stuff.
I'm keen.
But anyway,
sure.
Up through there, and I remember we shot my bull, and I had the front quarters on, and the front quarters of the tar are quite heavy. Because like deer are mostly like back end heavy, like their hind quarters will be heavier than their front quarters. But tar is a mountain animal. Just their front end is just built like a grizzly bear. So their front shoulder is almost way more than their back end.
Yeah, wow. I didn't know that.
When you look at a tar, like you'll see, like their front end is like a super broad and deep chest, and they've got that kind of slanting back down. And it's because they're just pushing from their front legs up a mountain, and they need to have that just raw strength. So anyway, I had the front quarters both the front quarters, and I think I had a back strap in my pack. But I was coming down the mountain in the dark because we had shot mine at about 9 o'clock at night. In New Zealand in the spring, it's usually light around 9 o'clock still. And I was coming down the mountain with that pack, and we did a stream crossing. And one of these streams is just way deeper than I thought it would be. So I went down just like, to my waist, and then I scraped my shin along this one sharp rock, and you can just like feel every vein in your shin all the way down. That was nasty. But basically all the way back down the mountain, I was sliding on my ass because my boots weren't gripping. It was an awesome experience. That it was a bit dodgy. But that's just like a trip of a lifetime for me. Again, that was with Chris. He took me out on that. We were basically going up after a group of nannies because on this public land, a lot of people are just shooting bulls and leaving the nannies. So nanny numbers are way too high. Like you're seeing herds of 20 or 30 nannies. So we were going up to go out, get a nanny or two for the table. But we were going up, and then we see lower down this valley just a group of about 5 or 6 bulls, and there happens to be one really good bull. Like most bulls in these areas don't get above 4 or 5 years old. One I shot was 6.5.
Awesome.
12.5 inch, 12 3/4 technically, but you measure it by the shortest horn. I say that everyone is 12 3/4, but that was just an awesome experience. That's the one trophy animal that I've got so far.
That's awesome.
But that was an awesome experience. I remember we got down to the truck close to 12 o'clock at night because it was just a long, long hike down from the mountain. And I'd saved a little bottle of whiskey as like a celebration for when I get my first tar. I'm going to drink this after I get my first tar. And that whiskey was never so good. Like it just warms the cockles of your heart. Sitting in these backcountry huts. But yeah, that would be my dodgiest experience.
Definitely sounds painful smacking your shins on rocks as you're going down.
Shins are just bad. It's a bad place to do it.
They do.
Okay.
So what's the most important item you take out with you?
Oh, knife. Good knife.
Good knife?
You intend to be killing an animal, you got to have a good knife on you. Like a big thing for me is like when you get an animal, you do it the respect of using as much of it as possible. Is what I try at least. So a good knife is just an essential part of that.
Yeah, definitely agree.
As hard as you might try, you can't just rip apart a deer with your hands. So having a good knife that break it down to quarters that are manageable. I've been also trying like a few different butchering techniques recently with a good knife, and you can so basically instead of taking shoulders, ribs, and neck off as separate parts, you just kind of fillet it off the rib cage as one giant piece.
Yep.
And then you roll it up and you can stuff it in a game bag.
Okay. Cool.
But having a good knife for that is just like essential. Again, like what I was saying before, one that's like sturdy enough that you can do skinning and it won't lose its edge, but also one that has like enough of a tip on it that you can do the fine boning. Especially around like the hindquarters, I find a lot of people like they can do a pretty sloppy job when you have just a regular pocket knife. You can't get in around that ball joint and then back around the rump.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's something I do really try to do. So a knife would be up there, a good solid knife.
No, definitely a good answer. What's the funniest thing that's happened while you've been out?
Oh God, I don't really know if I'd call this a funny experience, but it is kind of funny thinking about it now. But it didn't technically happen while I was out, but I was on a station where I did a bit of work last April. It's more funny just thinking about it happening. But basically there's this big station, they do a bunch of like guided red stag hunts. And the guide, Chris, was out, taking clients out, looking at stags. I think they were just starting off the Roar at that point. But they look over the edge, and there's not supposed to be anyone on the property. It's like 50,000 hectares, and there's just this one guy just walking through with his rifle. Like, what the heck is that guy doing there? Because this place gets hit pretty hard with poachers. So anyway, they ended up like pursuing the guy like across valleys and stuff. And then Chris ends up just like tackling him and leaping on him, and then he ends up breaking his ankle on rocks as he like fell down.
Brutal.
So when I came to camp about a week later, I didn't know that all this stuff had happened. And I see him, he's coming out on crutches, and he's got a big leg cast, and I was like, what the heck has been going on at these camps? But like I could just imagine that being kind of funny. It was that whole experience though for them was kind of rough, because that guy, so basically he was coming back for the second time. He had already come and shot $18,000 stag.
Yeah, wow.
Cut the head off, walked, and was coming back for the second time round. That's when they caught him.
That's insane.
And like for these stations, like that money is just essential. And like Chris put so much time and effort into managing that specific herd.
Yeah.
Like when I was talking about like managing the hind numbers and taking stags right time of year, like Chris does all of that. Like hinds are managed properly, so there's plenty of feed around. The ones with bad the stags with bad genetics get chopped out pretty quick. All the stags, like they're not shooting they're shooting stags that are 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, which is crazy for red deer across most of New Zealand.
Yeah.
And this is like fully free range. It's the Otago herd, like this particular one is pure Scottish red deer. One of the liberations that came from this area is the only truly wild red deer release into New Zealand. All the other ones came from game parks. These came straight from the Scottish Highlands.
Yeah, wow.
So like he has done a huge amount of work at protecting it, and then that guy came in and shot one of his deer, and so that part definitely not funny.
No.
But like the image of him leaping after the hunter and rolling down the hill, yeah, I could imagine that being quite funny.
Yeah, just spear tackling him on a rocky surface. Yeah.
Oh, he was dedicated. He's a bloody good guy. He's a wealth of knowledge. He does guiding in Canada as well.
Oh, awesome.
So for like stone sheep, caribou, moose, all of that kind of stuff. So he's like just listening, like sitting down and just listening to what he has to say around the campfire is just awesome.
He'd be definitely a wealth of knowledge, and I definitely follow him on Instagram, and yeah, he posts some amazing stuff. That's for sure.
Oh, that's crazy. I've got to see some of that stuff firsthand, and just like a few times that I just shut up and just that's amazing. Yeah, no.
So, what would be your top 5 dream animals with money out the equation, anywhere in the world?
That's tough. Okay, most of them live in North America. There's something about the states, particularly northern states like Alaska and Canada. That would just be amazing. Like Sitka blacktail, because of that was like the first time when that kind of switched in my head that hunting was pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do it on Prince of Wales, to rough it out kind of. I wouldn't have to shoot a massive buck or anything, but just anything would be cool.
But you basically have that in New Zealand with Stewart Island whitetail. It's
very different. I would say the closest thing we have to that would be in Fiordland. But then you're hunting, that's more like hunting elk on Prince of Wales.
Yeah.
Because we actually have wapiti.
Yeah, you do.
They're technically not elk, they're like the most pure blood elk there is like 75% elk, 25% red. And then there's a lot of variation between them. But yeah, like the Stewart Island whitetail that we have are very, very different. They're really small.
I just mean like the hunt itself.
Oh yeah. I guess it's also
cold,
like the stuff they hunt
jungly.
there. It's more like lowland forest, not mountains and stuff. But yeah, I kind of get what you mean. It is kind of like that. We also do have like a second herd of whitetail near Wakatipu, Lake Wakatipu. That would be a lot more like it because that's actually mountains. But there's something about Sitka blacktail. They look like such a cool little deer.
And just that call that they blow on as they're going.
Yeah, I've seen that. It looks just also like their antlers, how it's that dark chocolate brown. I think that would just be amazing. Then next would be buffalo, bison. This is the icon of like North the hunting America. World, really. Yeah. To do the Copper River bison hunt, that once in a lifetime tag.
Yeah.
That would be amazing. Woodland caribou, the ones up the Cassiar Valley in British Columbia. That would be amazing because this caribou in general is an animal that I would love to go hunt because they're just such an incredibly wild animal.
Something I learned on one of the previous podcasts. Did you know that there's a caribou herd in the southern hemisphere?
Yes, Norfolk Islands or something. Yeah. Not Norfolk Islands, but there's a herd. It's not there anymore. It was culled out.
I was looking it up the other day.
It may still be there, or they may have done a cull and reduced most of them. But it's in one of the South Georgia. That's what it's called. That's the island. But they tried also doing muskox down there.
Okay, cool.
Because it was sort of like that kind of like Arctic environment. Yeah. But I've heard that those technically aren't caribou, they're reindeer, but like it's just the same. Same
thing, different.
Yeah, they like in Alaska, they class the caribou and reindeer as different. Like on some of the islands, I remember in Alaska, they have reindeer, which is just the domestic stock that was introduced, but they're pretty much the same thing.
It would be bloody cool. Like being able to say
like
that you
woodland
shot a
caribou in particular, they're just bigger, their antlers are heavier, they're not in like massive herds, they're really hard to hunt. And also just because they're not doing all that great either in a lot of their range. So like to be able to go and hunt that for the last time would be amazing.
It would be.
So that's 3, right?
Yes.
Okay. So then it would have to be one of the bear species. So like probably less grizzly, but black bear. Black bear would be really cool to do, just because it's very, very different to what we have in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Also, just like a bear meat apparently is supposed to be great, and then bear fat is supposed to be great.
I've had black bear jerky, and it's pretty good. But
that would be good. That would be so good. I'd love to just get a jar of bear fat. Be so good.
Hit up Clay, see if he can send you.
Clay Newcomb, beer grease. Say I'm like balding here. Just replying onto that. But anyway, and then I really don't know the last one. I'd probably be something like mule deer. Mule deer seem like a cool animal to hunt. Like in North America in general, like I'd just love to go hunt there. Like there's something about it. I don't know why, but there's just something about that whole hunting culture there that just seems so. Actually, probably not mule deer. It would be one of the sheep species. It'll be like Dall sheep or something. Dall sheep would probably be my number 5. Of course, all 5 that I said are really expensive, but I can definitely afford as a student. Definitely. But yeah, no, those would be my top species. Like, hopefully by the time I can afford that, they're around and they're like doing well and I can hunt them, especially for the caribou. Like wood bison, from what I've heard, are doing better there now. Like they're starting to reintroduce them. So hopefully there's more opportunity for bison. But it'd just be awesome just to hunt those animals.
It would be. Yeah, all of them would be on my. I don't have I've got like a top 20 list in.
Yeah, I probably have that. It was hard saying those 5 because there's a lot of ones that I'd like to do. I don't think many hunters can honestly say that there's like 5 that they just like to do, because there's so much. You could never hunt every species in the world.
No.
Even in New Zealand, it would be very hard for me to do every species, but also in every place in New Zealand. Like, that's the world of hunting is almost endless.
Yeah.
And that's what's so great about it. Everyone's experience is so different, and there's just so much. You can never reach the end of it.
And everyone gets
into it. It's like YouTube. You can never reach the end of
YouTube. Exactly. Everyone gets into hunting for different reasons, and we all have, like, you talk to some people and it's like, why is that animal your go-to? This is my go-to animal. Like,
I can't explain it most of the time.
Yeah. It's like, and like fallow, like I've have arguments with people all the time. Like, they won't touch fallow, they won't eat fallow. That's dog food. Like,
yeah, so that's the thing down south. That on this particular station, they call them bush rats. Fallow, they despise fallow with a vengeance. But the reason why they hate them is because the fallow are really aggressive, and the reds are big sooks, and the fallow will kick the reds out of an area. I remember this guy that was doing high fence hunts, and he was putting fallow bucks with his red stags during part of the year, and his fallow bucks kept on killing his red stags in those fences. They're crazy aggressive. Like, on this particular station, they had culled off a whole bunch of does, like 600 does. This. It was a lot, but they didn't touch any buck. So there were so many bucks that they were just like killing each other. Like, this was probably the one time I've said to a deer, I won't eat that deer, because it literally had like purple flesh from septicemia, from like just holes all through the body. Like, this is the one buck that my dad got. I'm still yet to shoot a stag or a buck. But what buck my dad got, it was just like, that thing was not making it too far after the rut. It had so many holes in it. It was just in horrible condition.
You'd be surprised what they can push through. As soon as, if they make it through the rut, they can.
This was abnormal, mate. It was like a 2-to-1 buck to doe ratio. But there was still lots of does around. So what these bucks, they basically had these 12 big bucks, and they had herded 30 does into this little area, and they had a big licking pad. But you could literally see from a mile off just this big flattened circle of grass where they had just demolished the brush in that area. And there's so many of those bucks were just sitting down panting, because it was just so aggressive there. It's something I've never seen before.
That's nuts.
It was an awesome experience. I also shot so Dad shot the buck late at night, and they couldn't get through down this deep gorge and over to it that night. So then I came with my dad the next morning and shot a doe out of that group. And the doe was like incredibly fat, like an inch of fat on her. But even she like had one of her shoulder bones had snapped and fused together. They're just tough animals.
They are extremely tough animals.
Gosh, yeah.
So, going off of eating them, what's your favorite thing to cook with hunted game?
That's hard. I love my hearts. Like, I love them. I love my hearts. They're my one thing, like, my family doesn't really like eating them, but I don't complain, because there's only enough of me. So I usually, like, I have a few close friends that I started exposing to venison and whatnot. So I cooked them up some heart for the first time, and they didn't even know it was heart. I just said it was backstrap. Because what I had done is, when you cut up a heart, they basically have those 3 big muscle walls. So I just cut it into that and then flattened it so it just looked like a steak. And then I finally score it and then marinate it for a few nights. And then I add a pinch of like sugar, which sounds crazy, but then when you put it in the pan, it just caramelizes and just becomes really nice. And then you serve that rare, thinly sliced, and that is some of the best stuff in the world.
Awesome. I'm gonna have to try.
I love eating, like, with fallow deer. Like, we shoot quite a lot of fallow does. So like the leg cuts and the back steaks and tenderloins, it's like a staple in our house.
Yeah.
But I will also really do love a slow cooking meal. And for that, the best would be tar.
Yeah.
Would be my bull tar that I got. Tar's interesting, particularly the bulls during the spring and stuff. They taste great. Like they taste like a mix between beef and venison, but they are really, really, really tough. Like if you've ever cut up a billy goat and then you cut through the back streak, you can almost see silver skin in between the muscle fibers.
Yeah.
That they're really tough that way. So you never use it as steaks. I use all the solid muscle cuts for jerky, but then all my shoulder cuts and the tougher leg cuts for like a slow cook curry. So my grandmother, my nani, does a really good curry. It's just like a little bit of coconut and just like a heap of really aromatic spices, and that with tar just ends up being great. I love that.
That sounds good. Yeah, curries are pretty much a go-to in this house. We in the slow cooker, coconut milk, curry, and then I add all my herbs and spices and tin of tomatoes, and it goes good.
Yeah, like I'm half Indian, so on my mother's side of things, we eat a lot of Indian food. So as I started eating a lot of game meat, I've started making like Indian versions, wild game versions of Indian dishes like biryani or
awesome.
Meat. What we call meat sabji is what you call a curry. I tried doing like a tandoori on a young wild goat. That was good, but like I need to change a few things up with that. And I do like tandoori rabbit or something like that when I can.
Sounds good.
And that, like, I've been pretty lucky in our house. We're pretty picky about our food. Like, we like good quality food. So, like, as a family, we enjoy having like good quality meals that we put time into. And we've been able to do that with a lot of venison and stuff in the freezer.
Speaking of the rabbit, have you done the cacciatore recipe out of the Stephen Ranella cookbook? The Meat Eater cookbook?
No, I don't have his cookbook, but what I have is his guide to big game and his guide to small game. I have those. Yeah. I should really try that. I've heard that one is really good.
It's really good.
I haven't for a while had like enough rabbits to do it. It's been like one or two, and unless I'm like saving up rabbits for like months on end.
2 or 3, you can.
Yeah,
that's normally what I go, 2 or 3, and you normally get enough.
I need to go down south because South Island, Otago, has ridiculous numbers of rabbits.
I bet.
I remember one day we did 100 in the morning, just with the 22s sitting on top of a ute. That was good fun. That was one of my like it was when I first did that deer hunt when I was 16. We did a lot of that, and that was before I knew I could eat rabbit. Now I can eat rabbit. I'm like, holy crap, that was a lot of waste.
I love it. KFR. If you haven't
yes.
I do Kentucky Fried Rabbit nuggets. It's
sounds good.
It's so good. Really good. It takes a lot of time because you're like taking all the little bits of meat off the bone and just little sections.
I just use the the loins, wouldn't you, for that kind of stuff?
I do all of it, like the whole thing into it. And it's kind
I guess when you get those younger rabbits, you could almost just leave it bone in with those young ones. Like I had one that we shot the other day, and it's just so tender. You basically didn't need a knife to peel the legs off. You can just kind of peel. Like that's when you know an animal's tender. But I like some of the, like you go down south and you get some of those big does down there, rabbit does, and they're just big. And like with those ones, you cannot fry that. Yeah. That needs time and slow cooking.
Soaking in milk works a treat.
I haven't tried that. In general, wild game, I don't really try that. What we do a lot in our house when we have like venison and we're making stir fries, we'll marinate that in yogurt. I'll make that like I'm busy during the week. So I'll take a whole silver side and I'll slice it super thin and then marinate it in yogurt and then in like harissa or something really nice like that. And I'll stave that as a stir fry and I'll use it bit by bit. And then over 4 or 5 days time, by you get to day 5, that thing is ridiculously tender.
I bet.
So it just gets better with time.
I'm going to have to try that. That's for sure.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good stuff. My sister always asks for the recipe for that, and I kind of got like sick of her asking the recipe, so I made the recipe and put it up on the site so that she can just go and look at the recipe there. But yeah, no.
What you should have done is put a paywall on that and made her pay.
Oh my god, I wouldn't have the end of it with that. Oh god, yeah, no.
So, how do you see the public views on hunting and hunters?
It really depends. Like, when you have like a small percentage of people across Australia, New Zealand, and probably the rest of the world that just hate hunters. Those are the ones that are the loudest and seem very, very large a lot of the time, and those are the ones that are kind of like a lost cause. We're probably not going to be getting them back. And part of that is just because of the way their ideals, but it's just also in their nature almost. They're like closed off to ideas outside of their own. And I feel that's something that, especially within like cities, and I've noticed at university, so a lot of people are very set in their ideas. They don't really stray away from those ideas, and they don't really think about the other perspective. And that's something that like hunting requires of the outside population. And I guess it's hard as a hunter sometimes to understand that. But I think throughout the most of the population within New Zealand, I'd say it's largely positive, to be honest. Mostly because like deer, pigs, goats and stuff are recognized as a pest. So they recognize that hunters do a service. And it's not just killing for the sake of killing. Of course, there's bad apples out there that'll just shoot shit for the sake of shooting shit. But there's, I think, for the most part in New Zealand, like I find with people, like at university, you get a lot of young people that are very reactionary. That'll see, oh, you hunt, it's like, oh my god, that's Bambi, or something like that, or like some quote along those lines. And then you explain to them, like, oh, they're an introduced species in New Zealand, we hunt them for food, this is what we do, blah, 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 blah. And then they're like, oh, that's actually kind of cool. But on the flip side of things, I've had kind of average experiences with it. Like I remember once, in one of my first lectures, second lecture of university altogether. So I had on my back wallpaper a deer that I had shot. And I was just minding my own business, wasn't talking to anyone. I was in my lecture, I'm trying to focus, and then I have these people behind me, and they tap me on the shoulder. I'm like, okay, and they're just trying to say hi. And then they start lecturing me on how I was such a bad person for shooting that deer. And at one, I was just trying to focus on the lecture that was being done, but it was quite funny, like that. These people were so set in their ideas, and they had never met me before, never talked to me before, didn't know the whole situation behind it, but thought I was a bad person just by that one photo. And it wasn't like a very gruesome photo either. It was just like the deer lying dead in the tussock. It was quite a beautiful photo, I thought, but. In that scenario, like it wasn't, it's interesting. And to be honest, in those situations, like the best thing you can do is just not say too much in reply. Yeah. And just say, okay, that's cool.
Just
like that's cool that you think that way. Like I think about it differently, but like be polite and all that kind of stuff. There's no reason to be rude about it, but like, I guess it's just knowing those underlying reasons why they think about it that way. Especially because, like, I found with the young generation of people that I'm around, they have very little connection to their food.
Yeah, 100%.
Like, if you ask them, like, what, they'll eat beef every night, let's say. But if you ask them, where does the sirloin of a cow come from? Like, what part of a cow does that come from? They'll have no clue. Like I had one person say that veal was a bird, was a type of bird. It was bloody great. She wasn't that smart, but
that's hilarious.
There's just like just crazy stuff. And that's something that I've like almost taken for granted, because even in our house, we've been like very thought out and methodical about what we eat. And even like my grandmother had quite a big garden there. You grow like broccoli, cauliflower, chilies, beans, capsicums, garlic, potatoes, just everything. And as a young kids, like during our Christmas holidays, we'd spend a lot of time helping out in that garden. And I guess it's just like that realization of where your food comes from. And once you like explain that to a lot of people, I think most people are pretty open to it.
Yeah, 100%.
And you do it like in a nice way.
Yes.
Like it's just if you're trying to explain to them any other topic. Even though like for a lot of hunters, it's something that they care about a lot more, and it'll be like, oh, how dare you say that this is a blasphemous thing? It's most of the time it's just a gap of an understanding.
Education thing.
Yeah, no.
It's just funny how that one incident happened in a university.
Oh god, yeah, no. I've had like a few more instances where I've been told that you're a horrible person for this, blah blah blah. I've had ones on Instagram where like Andrew Giuliano, the bald chef.
Yeah.
So he did an article on one of his rooster hunts for our page, and it was one of his posts, and it was like already been up on my page for a couple of months, and I got a whole parade of people saying that I was a horrible person. So firstly, I had to explain that I didn't shoot that deer, but two, I had to explain to them, I'd explain to them that, this is an introduced species and no natural predators. They do a lot of damage to the bush, and it was like I did an open-ended question of like, if we're not going to kill them and their numbers get overpopulated, would you want to see them starve? And the whole thing was like, oh, that doesn't happen in nature. The nature sorts itself out, the great circle of life. But like it's just, I do think with the public sometimes they don't have that depth of understanding of
100%.
the interaction between life and death, what it actually is.
Yeah.
It's very different learning about it or reading about it than actually doing it.
I definitely agree with you there. And one thing that I bring up quite a bit to people who are a bit like that is, so would you prefer me to go out and hunt it and utilize the meat? And then I explain to them chopper culling and what happens there. And they're horrified.
Oh, yeah, no.
And it seems to change their mind completely. They're like,
oh god,
no, I'd much prefer the lands be open for you guys to go pay money and go hunt and then utilize the meat if that's what you're doing.
Yeah. I'd say that most people, that is the case. That's what they like. It's a human thing. I don't think it's. This is the thing. I don't think it's wrong either to step back and question why you're killing something.
Yeah, no,
like,
definitely.
I think in that premise is good to like think about it. As long as you think about it open-mindedly and you don't just say, "Oh, all killing is bad."
It's always good to question. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's always a question, and I think that like as a hunter, that's something that you should really have in the back of your mind. Like, why are you doing this? Are you doing it for the right reasons and blah blah blah? Everyone's reasons are different, but that's why I've always found with vegans, like it's something that I wouldn't subscribe to, but the key premise of it, where like respecting animals and their life, is something that I'd agree with. And I think with most people, you can find that common ground and then work from there.
Definitely. So how would you change the public views on hunting and hunters?
It's a hard one. To be able to convince, to show them that like hunting as a whole is a very nuanced thing. Every hunter is different in what their reasons are, and like every hunt across like Australia and New Zealand is done for a different reason. It's done in a different way. What may be seen as unethical or unjust to one species is essential for managing the population in another. And like, for instance, like separating like a meat hunter and a trophy hunter, like between from a lot of the public, that those are two distinct categories.
Yeah.
You're either a meat hunter or you're either a trophy hunter. You can't be both. Whereas for most people, like I find I don't shoot like a lot of big animals or anything, but I'd love, like, it's as much of a trophy for me to just get the meat. The meat is the trophy.
Yeah.
And for a lot of the public, that's hard to understand. That especially if you have like the radical anti-hunting side of things, like, oh, why would you kill an animal that you love? Like that. I don't enjoy like killing it as per se, but I understand that that's part of the process.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, that's probably what I'd say. It's just like the public has a very limited understanding of hunting, and part of that is because they have quite little like experience with hunters, especially as you go within the cities. Like Auckland doesn't have a lot of hunters. I know like one or two other close mates that are hunters. But whereas you go into the rural areas in New Zealand and every second guy has a rifle and they are hunting. And New Zealand hunting culture is pretty cool, to be honest.
It is completely different to Australian hunting culture, and just going over there just opened my eyes. And then going to America, that was the next level.
Yeah, no. I'd love to go to Oz, to be honest. I need to get over to Oz.
Come
I've
down.
gotten invited to do a rooster hunt over in New South Wales.
Lucky bastard.
That could be pretty cool. Or just go up north. But I can't really afford that. That's the thing.
Come down to
My
Adelaide.
student allowance doesn't allow that. But the good thing about the New South Wales rooster hunt is I'd just be staying at his place and then basically just going out onto a property that he has access to. I wouldn't be paying for a hunt or anything like that.
Yeah.
But no, like in New Zealand, we're pretty damn lucky. I'd have to say.
Well, if you find yourself down in little old Adelaide, sing out, and I'm sure Hainsey and I can sort something out.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like Hainsey gets onto a lot of deer. It does seem like he shoots a lot of deer and like pretty good animals.
Yeah.
And I'd love to go hunting with him because he, like, I feel like he'd have a lot of like same ideals as I would.
He does.
Getting the meat out, like respecting the animal, all that kind of stuff. The diversity of animals he ends up shooting is like the reds, the fallow. Doesn't he have like a cheetle on one of his places?
Chittle,
like,
rooster,
chittle
and rooster. Then goats, camels.
Then on what I remember when I first started talking to him, he had on one of those places they had like a bunch of escaped wapiti. And they had kind of been breeding with the reds, and he had shot one of the hybrids. That would be pretty damn cool.
Yeah.
But I think if I go over to his place, like I have access to reds and fallow in New Zealand, I'd probably go for if I could get onto a chittle or a rooster, that would be pretty awesome.
Take you over for foxes. I know Kiwis throw.
Oh, that would be kind of cool. That would be cool. That would be cool. Like, we don't have real predator hunting in New Zealand. Our biggest predators are feral cats. You hate them with a vengeance.
Trust me, I.
Oh God.
It's my cat skin cap, and then
oh my God,
cat skin stubby holder, like big koozie stubby holder.
Feral cats in New Zealand and Australia are just the bane. Like, also, I explain to people when I'm trying to say that like all introduced species are not the same. I would compare cats to deer. Yeah. Like, cats do so much damage in our bush. And deer do damage, don't get me wrong. But you can at least like manage deer to a point where they do less damage.
Cats are horrible.
Like the mere presence of a cat is horrible.
I'll have to send you an article later. You'll find it funny.
Oh God!
But
getting
back on topic. Getting more people into hunting in the modern age.
Yes. Okay. So this I've been going for the last like last couple of months actually. I've been trying to get I have 3 close mates of mine that I'm trying to get into hunting. And I've been trying to find like places to take them out for the first time. One that'll like allow new hunters like me to take them without a guide or something. And then even with a guide, like the sheer amount of money you have to invest with a guide, like the barriers to entry for modern hunters is ridiculous. Like the licensing process, the amount that gear costs nowadays and rifles cost nowadays. If you don't know someone, it is so hard to get onto places. That's why like NZDA does their hunts courses, which is like really good. Like it does cost a little bit. It's like a little over $100 or something. But they basically take you out for the day. They teach you everything A to Z, how to butcher an animal, or like tactics of hunting, and then you end up going out for a hunt at the end of the course. Like that kind of stuff, I think really needs to be pushed within Australia and New Zealand. And also when we have like on a private land block and we have an overpopulated herd, we don't cull it. We use that as an education experience.
Yeah.
Because when you have those overpopulated herds, it's kind of the perfect storm for teaching new hunters because there's so much abundance around. I think like that's kind of hitting two birds with one stone there, because you're managing the herd and then you're fostering those new hunters to come on through, and like teaching those hunters the right way. Like in New Zealand, we do a lot of education about firearm safety and that kind of stuff, and I think that's good. Don't get me wrong, we need that. But if you go to any of these hunts courses, nothing is taught about what's an ethical shot on an animal, how to butcher that animal, how to utilize that animal once it's on the ground. What's the correct way, like management-wise, how many hinds should you be shooting? What's the right time of year to be shooting hinds? All of that kind of stuff gets left out.
Yeah, that's sounds like it. It's needed here as well. We go on basic shot placement and caliber selection and stuff like that. But definitely should incorporate some like type of deer butchering courses into the.
God, yeah. Like a number of new hunters that I know that know a lot about like hunting, but very little about utilizing the food. But I think within New Zealand, we also need to use, like I was talking about, like utilizing the web, utilizing the internet as an incredible educational source. Like, what was that one that like Remy Warren and a bunch of them are working on over in the States? I can't remember what it's called. But it's like a hunt education thing.
Yeah.
I can't remember what it's called.
I can't remember, but I think they sponsor Ben.
Yeah, I think they do.
Studio. His studio is named after him, but yeah, I know where you're getting at.
Like using the internet as an education source, I think is incredible, because especially in the modern age of the web that we're in right now, not using it is just isolating a huge group of people that could be future hunters.
Yeah, 100%.
It's a way of drawing people off the computer and into the field, which I think is like a massive battle that we have. And also, like the last thing I'd say is creating ways to, like throughout human history, really, hunting has been passed down from parent to child. And that kind of, it's been passed down deliberately that way. You've always had that mentor kind of going all the way through. And while I think it's great if you can get a mentor, it shouldn't be something that's like absolutely necessary. Like within New Zealand, we should have like pieces of private land where we set aside like 2% of our tags. Let's say if you're managing a herd of 100 deer, you need to shoot 100 deer, put aside like 5 or 6 tags for new hunters at a reduced rate, where they can get a taste, and they can, as long as they have a license and it's legal, they can go out by themselves and just get that first deer on the board. We just need to be kind of get more creative with how we draw hunters in. Because I think the way we're doing it now isn't working. Like I'm part of the NZDA, and it's been good of recent, like you're seeing more and more young people, but if you look at the average age of the members, it's still very old.
Yeah, it's been very similar like that over here with our ADA. It's only just starting to change now. So
yeah, like it's a good sign. I think like a lot of those organizations will change over time, and as they become more modernized and streamlined, they'll get more new hunters in. But we just need to get creative, like getting students from university. I think is a really good one. While you're at uni, that's the period of time where you're supposed to be like experiencing new things and like outside of what you've been raised on.
Yeah.
So I think it's one of the best times to be like young minds that are supple and ready to be nurtured in that way. If you can get some of those people that have like an existing interest in like the outdoors or in wildlife or something, or in food. I feel like a lot of students, like good food. I find with a lot of people, that's a really good way to convince them to go hunt, is
through
first
their belly.
give them venison. I've been secretly doing that to my mates for about a year and a half now. I just invite them over for barbecues, and there'd be like some venison steaks and some sausages I've made.
That's great.
It's one cool little thing I do, but yeah, it's getting young people, but from different sources, not having to rely on the parents introducing them and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, definitely agree with you there, man. What is hunting to you?
God, that's open-ended. It's hard to say, mate. It means a lot. Like, I've always been someone since a very young kid who's been very interested in nature and being out indoors. I hate being in the city for too long, and I love that kind of like connection to the land and to the food and to the animals. It just seems right, and it's hard to explain. But
if you know, you know.
I don't like saying that, but like if you know, you know. And it's just really, really hard to explain. It's just like, especially when you're just going out and it's just like a few people and you're just sitting back and you're glassing. It's just that pure like peace and serenity. Like I can't remember what the book was, but it talked about this guy, and he did these big canoe trips through the Great Lakes, and he spent extended periods of time just by himself. And he explained the phenomenon and how he spent more and more time away from people, how things became simpler and simpler and simpler. How like the busyness and confusion of the outside world just slowly becomes shed away. And you start focusing on those few things that are like important. And I feel like for hunting for me is like a type of reset. It's a way that I can get outside and it just calms me down. It's not always calm all the time. Like if you're running after a deer, I'm not peaceful and serene at all. But it's a way to get back to the simpler things in life. And I think that's something undervalued. That just focusing on those few basic thoughts. Back to that canoe guy, he explained like as he went like 14 days, 20 days, a month and a half, and like further and on that, it didn't stop like the simplification. It just kept on getting simpler and simpler and simpler. And it's like it just shows like how complicated we sometimes make our own lives. And for me, like hunting is at least part that. It's a way to add simplicity to my life and break down those factors. And then for the food side of things, I love good food. It's something I take pride in. Like I love taking my time with butchery and getting the specific cuts right. I've invested in a new vacuum sealer recently and just like getting that perfect. There's the food side of things. It's just like from a moral perspective, like I like being connected to the food that I'm eating. Like I love when food comes from the garden. It tastes so much better. like my grandmother, whenever she grows like a cauliflower from the garden, it's just so much better. Like you actually like vegetables. But yeah, I just love that connection to my food. And from a moral perspective, I like that I took responsibility for that life, that life is in my own hands, and I took responsibility and I did it the best way I could. And I didn't pass on that responsibility to someone else to do. And I feel like I respect the meat that's in my freezer a little bit more because of that.
Yeah, no, it's the answer's always very, very similar to everyone. They put it in slightly different words, but it's always very, very similar. And every time someone says their side of it, I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, there's again, there's so much of hunting. Like, no matter where you are in the world, you could be, you could be in Africa hunting Cape buffalo, or you could be in the States hunting like some grouse or something. Like, you couldn't be two further things apart from each other, but you have these shared almost experiences and key moral values that are applicable in each instance.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah.
So, if people have loved what they've heard and they want to see more from you and hear more from you, where can they find you?
Okay, so first up, you'd want to message me about something or just talk, that's one thing I'm open to. If you're a keen hunter and stuff, I find that's fun. Like me, talking to people from around the world. Just go on my Instagram. It's Fill the Freezer 2.0, 2.0 because my original account got hacked. I was at 1,400 followers. And lost every one of them. I couldn't get it. Oh, it was brutal. And I'm now finally, I've gotten above that. I'm nearly at 2,000 now. But I could just imagine that if I hadn't lost those followers, where would I be at now? Yeah. Especially because there was a lot of people from like the States that I was never able to get back.
Yeah.
But anyway, you can go on there, Fill the Freezer 2.0. And then my website, which is basically, what I was trying to do is like a online hunting magazine that you can access for free. And we kind of deal with some of the topics. Like I found with New Zealand hunting magazines, they're almost too much trophy orientated. It's just about another person shooting another big deer. And don't get me wrong, it's awesome. But if you look at these magazines over a long period of time, it's the same like 6 or 7 articles that they're writing over and over again from different people. And they're beautiful animals, don't get me wrong. But I wanted to like bring a different perspective, like meat hunts and that kind of stuff. Also help teach people some of the butchery side of things. So we go into like aging game meat and packaging game meat and what freezer burn is. I have a few more going up soon that are like how to break down a hindquarter into all of its different cuts. And then we also do recipes and whatnot. So what I try to do for all of my contributors, as I call them, they write a hunt article and then they write a recipe article to go with it. So that's what I try to do. So that's fillthefreezer.co.nz. So head on over there. There's a bunch of articles that you can read. I think we got like 50 up at the moment. Trying to get 3 every couple of weeks up.
Awesome.
I hope to be doing a little bit more stuff with Fill the Freezer. I want to do some stuff like for beginner hunters and then some more conservation orientated stuff in the future. But at the moment, it's just a site for articles and whatnot. So go on there. You'll see this man's article. So we did a hunt, like bring kids up the right way. It was just you and then another guy named Ruben Jane. So both bring their kids up the right way, that kind of stuff in the outdoors. And yeah, so those are the 2 big ways to get in touch with me. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll put those links up in the show notes anyway, but
really?
I really appreciate you coming on. I know it's getting quite late. It's getting quite late over there.
It's midnight, yeah. I hope my parents can't hear too much of what I'm saying, but no, it should be good. It should be good. I do talk pretty loud sometimes, so I do feel sorry for them. It's been a pleasure, mate.
No, it's awesome.
Been good fun talking on here.
That 2 hours. That 2 hours rolled by real quick.
Yeah, it went bloody fast. That's what you want. If a conversation is drawing out too long, it should probably be ended.
I really appreciate it, man. So thank you for coming on, and everyone go over and check out his articles on his website.
Thanks, mate. It's been great.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Hunting Connection Podcast. Please head over to our social media and give us a follow. Instagram at Hunting Connection Podcast, Facebook at Hunting Connection Podcast, Twitter at Hunting Connect, TikTok at Hunting Connection Podcast. If you've enjoyed, please share with your friends and family, tag us in your photos and videos on social media, subscribe, rate and review to help grow the podcast. If you're interested in giving additional support to the podcast, you can head over to our podcast's Patreon page. Thank you very much for listening, and catch you next episode.